Alright, the time has come to finish up the modeling, and in this lesson we're just going to hit a bunch of small things that I think will really help make this come together. First, let's give this guy a cartridge. So let's head to the top, hit tab to go into edit mode, or I guess top of the device. I suppose this is the back of the model itself, but either way, what I'm going to do here is just make a cartridge, game cartridge, that's a separate object. But the easiest way to do that is to steal a face that's pretty close to what we want. So I'll just take this face back here and hit Shift D to duplicate, and this will give us a jump start on the new object. So to make this a separate object, we can go to Mesh, Separate, and Selection, or we could use the hotkey P. Then we can tab into Object Mode, select the new object, and I'll rename this Cartridge. Then I'll hit Tab to go into Edit Mode here, and hit E to extrude, and pull it out along the Y-axis. Our schematic doesn't show us how tall this should be, but we can kind of look at the perspective view and see that it's probably somewhere around here. Then let's snap the height. The bottom was already snapped, but we can take this top face, hold Control and hover over one of these top vertices. There we go. And now let's bevel those corners. Let's take the two edges on the side, hit 7 to go to top view, and then hit Control B, bevel that out. And we have to just kind of guess how much we should bevel this, and I'll do it just a little bit less than what's on the device itself. I'll overshoot just a little bit like we did before, and pull up the shape just to make that a little bit more smooth. And maybe we need one more segment. I'll go with a shape of about 0.62, but of course it doesn't have to be exact. And then let's make an inset where we can put the game artwork. So then I'll select the top face here, hit I to inset. This will be the ridge that goes all the way around, and then we want one more inset to pull back down, so I'll hit I to inset again, and then just pull this ever so slightly down along the Z-axis. Now we have all of these blue edges, which are marked as our bevel weights, but they're on the wrong edges. We started from a face that had some bevel weights around it, and so it just tried to extrapolate that outwards and kind of got it wrong. So let's select everything here, go to Item in our sidebar, and take the mean bevel weight all the way down to 0, and just start over. Now we'll go back to Solid View here, hit 2 to go to Edge Select mode, select both of these top and bottom edges, the loops that go all the way around, and increase the bevel weight. Since we started with a piece from the other object, our modifier has been carried over as well. I'll give that a pretty big bevel, hit Tab to go into Object mode, and I think we're looking good. Next, I really want to add a few more details to the buttons. First, let's look at the D-pad. I'd like it to have a circle in the middle, and those arrows on the outside, just like in the schematic. So let's add those just like we've added everything else so far. I'll hit Tab to go into Object mode, and we can select this top face, and just hit Delete and Faces. Then I'll select this loop that goes around the outside, Shift S, cursor to selected, that way when we add something new it'll be already snapped to the right height. And first, let's add the circle. I'll go to X-ray view, Shift A, and circle. 32 vertices is way too many, so I'll go down to 8. And I think maybe that's not quite enough. Let's try bumping it up to 10. That looks close enough. Then I'll increase the radius, and just scale the rest of the way until it looks about right. I'll overshoot the size just a little bit because we want to inset, kind of like we've done before. And now let's make the other shapes as well. A quick way to make a triangle is just to make a circle with 3 sides. I can hit Shift A and add a circle, take the vertices down to 3, and then just move this up. If we want to make it a little bit taller than it is wide, we can just grab that bottom edge and pull it down. Again, I'm overshooting the size a little bit, and I don't want it crammed quite so closely to the edge, so it's going to be slightly off from the schematic. Then I'll take all 3 of those edges, hit Shift D to duplicate, and then I don't want to get it off axis, so I'm going to hit R and 180. I'll cancel the movement and then rotate that down, and then move it along the Y-axis. That way it's going to line up exactly. And then to get the other ones, I'll select the top 3 vertices at the top, and since the pivot point is the average between these two, if I were to Shift D again to duplicate, and then R 90 degrees, then it'll place the other ones right where they should be. So the last step is just to connect all of these like we've done before. I'll take an edge from the triangle and the right of the circle, connect those up, connect some up here, connect those faces, and those. Then since my view is way off here, I'll select some edges from the D-pad, hit period on my number pad to zoom to it, that way I can orbit around it easily. And then take the top of the edges and fill them in with just some part of the triangle or any part of that cross shape. Oh, looks like I missed. Let's do this in solid view so maybe we could see this a little bit better, or turn off X-ray. There we go. And when we were in X-ray, you could definitely see that our normals were in the wrong direction. So let's just select everything here just to make sure, and go to Mesh, Normals, and recalculate outside. It looks like I flipped those buttons around as well. Then I'll continue connecting these. Those top edges to the triangles. And then we can go through and fill everything else. Remember, we can just select one edge, if it's a triangle or a quad, and then just hit F to fill. Oh, it looks like it doesn't really know which one to do there, so it works sometimes, but not all the time. I'll make a couple triangles there. Fill those triangles. Okay. There we go. Then let's fill the triangles themselves. Select all three of those edges, again hit F. And this one over here. And let's fill this circle. Oh, looks like I missed a couple edges over here. There we go. Okay, select all those edges, and again hit F. Now we can go to Face Select mode. First, let's inset this circle and push it downwards. I'll hit I to inset, and push it down along the Z-axis. I'll do the same thing with these triangles, but I didn't want to do it at the same time because I might want a different thickness. I to inset, and push it down. Then let's take a look at this in object mode. I think that looks just about right, but I'd like the triangles to be just a little bit smaller. So what I'll do to do that really quickly, since all of the inside triangles are already selected, I'll hit Control and then plus to grow my selection. And then if I scale this all down, then that's not going to work, but I can go back to my pivot point, switch this back to individual origins, scale them all individually, but that'll scale it on the Z-axis as well, and I don't want that because then it'll no longer be flush with the rest of the object. So then what I can do is hit S, but then Shift Z to do everything except the Z-axis, and just scale it down on only the X and Y axes. So I'll scale these triangles down just a little bit, and then switch my pivot point back to median point. There we go, I think that looks a little bit better. After that, I'd really like to add some text for the buttons. So let's add the Start and Select text. Let's hit Shift A, and go down to Text. We haven't used text objects yet before, but they're pretty easy. I'll go ahead and push this up, and it looks like it's really, really big, so let's just scale it down. There we go. We can change the properties of the text over in the text data properties. Select that, and the first thing is to set the alignment from horizontal left to center. Now to change the text itself, we actually have to go into edit mode. This is a little bit weird, but it works fine. So let's hit tab to go into edit mode for our text object, and then we can backspace away the text, and then I'll type start in all caps. Then I'll hit tab to go back to object mode, 7 to go to top view, and scale this down, place it right above the left pill-shaped button there. Keep it relatively small, something about there, and hover it over just above the surface. I'd like this to have a little bit of thickness, and we can do that in the geometry section of the text data properties. Just take the extrude and pull that out a little bit. Let's do 5 centimeters. Pull this up along the Z-axis until it pokes out just enough. Then we can arrange that into place. And then I'll hit Shift D to duplicate this down, move it down just below the bottom section of the second pill, hit Tab to go into edit mode, backspace that away, and this time I'll type select in all caps, then Tab to go back to object mode. If you want to change the font, you can do that in the font panel, but I'll just keep at the default regular Blender font. Now I'll make the text for the A and B buttons. I'll take the select text, hit Shift D and move it over. And I believe the A is usually on the right in the old school Game Boys, so let's do that. I'll make the A first, I'll place it right above, backspace in edit mode, type a capital A, and hit Tab to go back to object mode. Then I'll scale it up to be the right size, and try to place it right in the center. Now for this one, I'd really like it to be indented into the button rather than just a bump on top of it. For that we can use a new modifier that we haven't checked out before, and that's the Boolean modifier. We'll talk a lot more about that in later courses, but the short of it is it's for adding and subtracting 3D objects. Let's say we have two objects here, I'll just take two spheres. I'll scale one up just as an example, Shift D, have it overlap the other sphere a little bit. Okay, let's say we have this sphere here, and we go to our modifiers. Let's add a Boolean modifier, and then choose the second sphere as the Boolean object. Now in order to actually see what this is doing, I'll hit Z and go to wireframe view, and that way we can see the actual wireframe of the selected object. If we choose difference, then this sphere is subtracted from this one. If we choose intersect, it's like the overlap of the Venn diagram, but in 3 dimensions, and if we choose union, then it'll meld the two together. But for what we need for the text, we'll be using difference, which is the default. Then we can just take this sphere and just punch a hole right through the other sphere. And if we hit H to hide, then we can see the result. So it's a pretty cool modifier. I'll go ahead and delete these example spheres, and let's just do that with the text and the button. So to center my view, I'll select the text, hit period on the number pad, and there we go. And I need a little bit more depth to punch through here. So I'll go back to the text properties, extrude this just a little bit more, and push this into the button. Then I'll take the console object, go to my modifiers, add modifier, and Boolean. Now, unfortunately, I can't actually choose a text object as a Boolean object. It has to be a mesh object. So let's make our B first, and then just join these objects together, and then convert them to a mesh, and then we can use it as a Boolean. So let's go to top view here. I'll hit Shift D and duplicate this down. Move that over. Hit Tab to go into edit mode. Type a capital B and then tab back into object mode. And try to center this more visually there. Alright, and once we have both of our objects, then we can select both of them, go to Object, Convert, and Mesh. You can also use the Apply menu with Control A and apply visual geometry to mesh. Then to join them, we can go to Object and Join, or use Control J. Now we can tab into Edit mode, and see that these are just normal mesh objects now. I'll tab back to Object mode, and let's use these as the Boolean. I'll select the console again, choose the eyedropper for the Boolean object, and choose the text. We should probably name our text objects appropriately, so I'll select the Start, double-click in the outliner, and I'll call this Start. I'll choose the Select one, name that Select. And then for the A and B buttons, I'll just name this Buttons Boolean. Then I'll go ahead and hide it, but I also want to make sure to uncheck the render icon so it won't show up in the render. If you forget to do that, then you'll see it poking out and it'll be a little bit confusing. But it looks like the shading is wrong a little bit here, and that's because the Boolean modifier takes the shading from the original object. So let's unhide this, and we can see that the sides of this are smooth shaded. So we can really easily fix that just by right-clicking and choosing Shade Flat. Then we can go ahead and hide it again. Speaking of shading, and before we go too much further, I'd like to add smooth shading here, because I'd really like these bite marks and some of these rounded areas to be smooth, but I want some other areas to be very sharp. So we're going to have to do a little bit of custom shading. If we select our console, right-click and shade smooth, then we're going to get a pretty bad result right out of the gate. But that's okay, we can easily fix that. First, let's go over to our data properties, down to normals, and choose auto smooth. That'll give us an angle which it'll split the shading at, and 30 degrees seems to work pretty well. It's not perfect, but it gets us pretty close. Though with that off, I did notice that there was some weird shading errors over here, which means that the normals were probably incorrect. So let's hit Tab to go into edit mode, select everything, and hit Shift N to recalculate the outside, and that'll fix that issue. I just wanted to make sure we get that before I got distracted with something else. Alright, let's turn Auto Smooth back on, and that gets us most of the way, but not quite all the way. You can see we have some problems here at the bottom, and there are just some edges that I wish were sharp, so we can set those manually. Let's hit Tab to go into edit mode here, and first let's fix the bottom area. You can see that since this edge isn't quite 30 degrees, it didn't get sharpened. So I can just select the edge, right-click in Edge Select mode, and choose Mark Sharp, and that'll sharpen it right up. If I deselect that, it's not really obvious that it's a sharp edge though, and that's because the bevel weight is overriding it, so we see the bevel weight color, but not the sharp color. I'm not really working with bevel weights anymore though, so I'll go ahead and turn that visualization off, so we can see the result a bit better. I'll go to the overlays, down to bevel, and turn that off. Now we can see exactly which edges are sharp and which ones aren't, because it'll be highlighted in a little bit of a lighter blue. Then I'll just select the edges all the way around here. Let's make sure we get all of them. Up and around the side. Right-click, and mark sharp. Let's also take this edge loop that goes all the way through here, right-click, and mark sharp. Then we can tab to object mode to see the result, and that's looking a lot better. Oh, it looks like I accidentally marked seam. I clicked the wrong thing. Okay, mark sharp. There we go. And that does it. Alright, let's take our cartridge and do the same thing, though I don't think we actually need to set anything manually. Let's just try shading smooth and then going back to the normals and the data properties and turning on auto smooth. Oh, it looks like we should probably mark sharp that inside loop. So let's go ahead and take that edge loop, and also that one, right click, and mark sharp. There we go. And I think that's looking really good. So the very last detail that I want to add is those little tiny screws that were placed around the object in the concept art. So there's a couple on the sides here, some on the bottom, and I think that's just a really nice touch. So first let's model a super simple screw. I'll hit 7 to go to top view here, and let's just model this off to the side. I'll shift right click to place my cursor off to the side, shift A, mesh and circle. We want a few more than 3 vertices, but one thing that I really need here is vertices along the vertical and horizontal lines. So right now we have them along the vertical line, but not the horizontal. Otherwise it'll be really hard to model that Phillips head shaped inset. So let's increase this. We could go with 8, but I don't think that's quite enough. So let's just bump this up to 12, and that should be perfect. So with 12 vertices, I'll go ahead and name this screw. Tab to go into edit mode. Let's just immediately hit F to fill, and then I to inset. That'll give us a nice part of the circle to work with. And very similar to how we made the panel cut that went all the way around the body of the device, let's go ahead and create a bevel that we can pull inwards. To make the shape, I'll just go ahead and connect these 2 vertices, top and bottom, with J. Again, J to connect and not F. F will get you into trouble. J to connect. And then I'll take these 4 edges, hit Ctrl B to bevel, and let's only have 1 cut in between, just like so. And then we can take these center edges. Oh, I'll hit period on my number pad to zoom to it. And then we can just pull these down along the Z-axis. There we go. Then I can take the outside edge loop, hit E to extrude and pull that down along the Z-axis. F to fill. And then let's bevel the outsides just slightly. Maybe we can make it a little bit thicker. Then I'll also grab this top edge loop, so I have both of these selected, and hit Ctrl B to bevel, scroll down on the mouse wheel so there aren't any segments in between, and just give the light a little bit of something to glance off of. It's a pretty small detail though, so it's probably not super necessary. Oh, okay, that was a bit too much. Let me step back. Oh, that went a little haywire, so let me try that again. And there we go. Okay, now we can place this around the object. I'll hit Tab to go to Object Mode. And first, let's just place this on the side. I'll hit 3 to go to Side View. Rotate this 90 degrees along the Y-axis. Looks like I need to scale it down a little bit just to place it right in the middle, like so. And then I'll snap it along the X-axis. Again, by holding Control to enable snapping, and hovering my mouse right over one of those vertices. Then I'll probably just rotate it ever so slightly, just so it's not completely straight. Then we can see we have some screws to place here on the sides as well. And maybe it should be a little bit smaller. I'm realizing that the screw inset is a little bit hard to see here, just because it's so thin. So we can actually go ahead and thicken that up pretty easily, because we can't really scale anything along the X or Y axes here. But that's because we're using the global axes. Since we rotated this in object mode and not edit mode, we can switch over to the local space, and then just take both of these sections here, scale that along the X just to fatten that up a bit, and do the same thing here. Actually, I'll just select both of those edge loops, S and then Y, and scale it along the local Y axis. And that looks a bit better from a distance. Alright, so let's take that. Let's toggle X-ray again, just so I can see where I can place these. And instead of doing a Shift-D, which is going to duplicate this over, instead what we'll do is an Alt-D and instance this over. The difference being that if I Shift-D something and I make a change to the new one, then it won't affect the original. But if I use Alt-D to make an instance, then if I hit Tab and make a change on one, it'll affect all of the others as well. But they can have their own individual scales and rotations and all of that stuff in object mode. That way, if I have to fix something like that again, I won't have to do it for every screw. Then let's go back from local space to global space, and just kind of move this into the right spot. Turn off X-ray, and just snap this over to the side. There we go. Then I'll center this just a little bit better, and then Alt-D to make another instance, and move this along the Y-axis over to the other side. Then I'll take both of them, Alt-D again, left-click to confirm, move this over along the X-axis, and then I'll rotate them 180 degrees along the Y-axis. Pull them in along the X, and snap. Alright, now let's do that for the bottom. I'll take one of these, Alt-D to instance. Let's rotate it correctly, rotate 90 degrees along the Y-axis. And looks like that was the wrong way, so let's do 180 along the Y-axis now. Flip that back around. Pull it up along the Z and snap along the Z. And then I can go Control 7 to go to bottom view, turn on X-ray, and line this up. These are a little bit bigger, so I'll just hit S to scale this up, but of course that might change how it's lying on the surface, so I might need to pull this out a little bit along the Z, just until it's hovering right over the surface. Then again, Control 7, turn on X-ray, and then I'll just Alt-D all the way around here and match up what we have in the schematic. I'll rotate each one ever so slightly, just so they're not exactly the same. Alright, then I'll turn off X-ray view and look at it in 3D, because sometimes what works in the schematic doesn't quite work as well here, and in this case I want to give a little bit more padding to the edges. So I'll just move this outside just a little bit. I think those are fine up there. Maybe that one I'll move closer. I'm using this little blue square on the gizmo just to move it on everything except the Z-axis. Okay, I think that's looking good. Let's take one last glance at the rest of the object just to make sure we didn't miss anything with the modeling, but I think we can call it done. Maybe I'll make one more tweak and just take the select button and move it down ever so slightly, and then call it a day. So if you followed me up to this point, give yourself a pat on the back. You've finished the modeling. Next we need to do just a little bit of materials, and then we'll be ready to render.